Hi, in this video I'm going to cover SPY analysis from a macro perspective and try to understand what cycle we're in. So as usual, you always see me start from a larger time frame in order to identify the most probable cycle. So here we go. I started from a 9-day. I usually do because if I start from a monthly, I'm just not going to get as many repetitive cycles that I can rely on. So let's go ahead and start from the 9-day and see what we can learn. So what we immediately jumps out to the eye is that we have a cycle that has a trough here that has morphing red curve to the upside. That's what we're looking for. And we're looking for the gray curve roughly to have this morphing shape. And let's take a look to see if anywhere on the left gives us that type of similarity, because that would be our starting point. So what we can see is that we have this area to the left, we have this area to the right. It's not exactly the same in terms of vertical placement, but this is a good starting point. We also have my momentum indicator, which is an indicator that I've developed on my end over the course of the last couple of months to identify the best possible placement within the macro cycle. So we can see it's moving down right here through the gray curve, and it's moving down right here through the gray curve. So I'm going to go ahead and place a vertical line right there. Now let's try to identify if any other areas also look similar. So we've got this area as well, which also looks quite similar. So we're going to go ahead and again take a look at this green curve. I know I've made it lighter, and I did that just so that I can identify the cycles better without affecting my without affecting my visual insights. So I'd say it's just light enough to not affect that here. So again, this spot right here, where we're looking for a moment where the green curve comes down. So we're looking for a moment where the green curve comes down. In this moment, it's coming down and they're already about to cross. In this moment, it's still coming down while gray is to the upside. So I like this moment better. So that's our second placement. And we're creating these placements so that we can in further analysis, I can zoom into smaller time frames and eliminate some of these vertical lines that don't really belong and are not true within what I consider the macro cycle. Okay, so another area is this one. And in this particular case, what happens beforehand is we also have this gray curve coming down and then another, like a second loop. And we have that going on here too. So let's go ahead and create this as a possibility as well. Somewhere in there. And again, let's zoom out a little bit to the left and try to discover if there's any other ones that really stand out. So at this point, nothing really looks as similar to, well, this part does look kind of similar as well. So I spoke too soon. And I would say that those 4 lines are enough to draw some type of best conclusion about what will happen during the next month of action. And I've explained why I think it's about a month or possibly longer, depending on, how good the frequency match is. And the bigger the time frame, the better it will morph into the favor of your forecast and for the duration that you expect. So now let's go ahead, and because we have 4 choices already, we really want to start eliminating some of these choices. So we're going to zoom down to a weekly, and we are also going to hide my little friend Greenie there. So now that we have these 4 lines, we can start actually examining them compared to now and start the process of elimination. Let me just delete these guys right here. And okay, so we've got this sharp gray angle coming up. Prior to that, it had a peak, and we're looking for that same type of formation to begin with. Now in this case, we have it. So it looks quite similar. I'm going to leave this vertical line alone. In this case, I would say we can eliminate this line because the gray crossed through it in the prior moment. The gray crossed through it here. I mean in the current moment, but it didn't cross through it here. And I also want to take a look at if this moment matches at all before I go ahead and eliminate this line. So in this case, we have, though it doesn't, because we had a lowest low in this cycle here and we don't have a lowest low here. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate this line completely, and that gives us 2 choices that remain. And now, again, with these particular choices, I can zoom in a bit and take a look at this signature kind of curvature that's evolving. Do we have it here? See, the problem that I have with this moment is the gray and the red curves are too close together, and they're not in this moment. And that almost helps me eliminate that particular curve. But I want to also see what happened prior to it. So prior to it, we have this upswing in the cycle, which matches. Then we had this downswing in the cycle, which also matches that to that. Then we had not a very sharp rise. In here we do have a sharp rise that was at a high, in this particular moment, we kind of do as well. It almost makes me want to leave that line in place for now. So let's go ahead and go to the last line to see if we can eliminate that one from the puzzle. So again, in this case, we've got the gray curve crossing down. In this case, a cross never actually happened. So they're dissimilar in that way. Prior to that, we had our trough, which looks very much like this trough in terms of the red and the gray curves being side by side, which then led to a peak here, downward motion here, gray through the red here, gray through the red here, not exactly at the same angle, and then this sort of squiggly diagonal upward rise there. And do we have that here? We sort of do. So all three of these cases are a fit. And now let's go down to a 2-day chart, because we're already kind of reaching a finale and we really want to now observe nuances between the three different cycles. Okay, well, it looks like on the 2-day we're not able to get enough history to pick up the very last vertical line, so let's go to a 3-day. Let's also make this easier on the eyes and compress it a little bit. So in this moment, it's very, very interesting because the gray curve is already curving down, and it's also curving down here. That's an important tell. What happens prior to that is different. We have two high cycles here, one high cycle here. Same thing with this area. We have in this area we have one high cycle, but we do not have the gray curve coming down as the red curve morphs up. So, because that is not in place, before I completely eliminate it, which I want to do here, I want to also make sure it doesn't belong in possibly another place like this, close to where I had the vertical line, but not quite there. So let me go ahead and just make sure that that's really the case, because you have to understand, when we're starting from a 8-day or 9-day chart, distances like a few months really are just nuances or noise in the macro cycle itself. They may seem like a lot in real time, but in actuality, in cycle time and in cycle shape, they could still be very much a part of that frequency. So we have that curve coming down. We have this red curve coming up. We have that in the past, in the current situation as well. We have a peak prior to that. We have a peak prior to that. After that peak, we have a downward slope. We have a downward slope here. Not as dramatic. It didn't lead to a new low, which it did in this case. So that does help reduce its case probability. Let's take a look at the third one before we eliminate this one, though, just to have a best two fit out of the three. So in this case, we've got the gray curve coming down, we've got the red curve coming up, We don't have that in this position, but we do have it in this position. So this would better identify the actual placement of the current situation within the macro cycle. So we have that moment matching. And we also have, we had a high prior to this moment though. Okay, we also have a high prior to that moment here. Then we had a low peak here. We've got the low peak here. Then we have a rise there. So let's go ahead and smooth these cycles out a bit. Because when the cycles are this noisy, it helps us identify the correct cycle, but sometimes when you smooth it out, you can eliminate some of that noise and notice nuances. So I'm going to do that with my smoothing indicators. And now let's have another look at things with more smoothness. So we've got that. We've got this shape right here, which is quite similar. What happened prior to it is not exactly similar. In this case, it's fairly similar, but what didn't happen, let's see. Okay. This one doesn't seem like a great fit. And it seems like this one could be eliminated, but I'm going to just take a look at this next one here as well. So in this next example, we had the low here, we had the high here, low here, high here. We come down, neither of these look as much of a fit as this does. Let's just take a look. Let's smooth it out even more. Sometimes these cases can be extremely complex, making it more difficult to do this process. So a lot of this is human interpretation and pattern recognition. So let's examine what happened here as a whole. So we've got this moment. A wave up prior to that, a wave down prior to that, and then this diagonal line right here. Let's see if we have that going on in the last case. So we have a wave down, a wave up, a wave down, and the diagonal is also in place, but it stretches further horizontally. Then we have a line down, then a line up, line down, line up. So that's fairly similar as well. Let's take a look at it in this case. So in this case, again, the line down, this case led to a higher high cycle peak, and it didn't here. This one is closer. Then it led to a lower low peak here. So higher high didn't happen here. Lower low didn't happen here. That's enough evidence for me to eliminate that particular case. So smoothing did help. It helped to eliminate a pretty tricky choice. Let's take a look at the last line. Again, we're looking for a lower peak towards what would be considered now, in this case, what could be considered now could be more over here. And we could have that lower peak here. Then we're looking for that upper peak, this one. We have that here. Then we're looking for a lower peak again that doesn't exactly make a lower low. And then we're looking for a sort of diagonal-ish trend here. And we don't have it. And that helps me eliminate this choice because as a whole, if you were to examine the entire frequency of the pattern, this choice immediately to the left of now fits better than way to the left. So I would say that that is a very in-depth analysis of what the MTF would look like and gives us our vertical placement bar. And that happens to be around, oops, let me just delete this. Around, yeah, September of 2016. And that places us, let's use Heikin-Ashi candles to smooth this fractal out. And what we notice about this fractal is it found the similar beginning of the downside, and it would put us right about there where all this noise begins. In price action, it's very similar to this noisy channel right in here, which resolves in what appears to be a bear flag. So we've got this noisy channel right here, which looks like in the duration of time could be quite similar. We've got that same noisy sort of channel right there, and that would extend all the way out to possibly October. So this could be a very tricky trading pattern in the sense that we may not get any new highs and just remain in this volatile range that resolves downward in a bearish manner and makes a lower low compared to that channel here. So it hypothetically would resolve into something like that with symmetry. Now the extent of the depth is hard to tell. You can sort of look at the symmetry here. You can see the kelp bands that I use are pointing down. You can see this 250 MA simple moving average that I use right here to also describe a support. But that is a pretty good projection about what to expect. And we've gone into depth to do it. So right around there, which is near New Year's and has been my expectation for quite a while already, a bullish trend would begin, and that bullish trend could potentially make new highs and trace along this trend line here and come all the way up like that into that 320 SPY area. So let's go ahead and draw a circle there. Let's draw a circle right here. And we can go to a larger time frame now and try to determine how deep this support actually would be when it does drop. So we've got my inverse jaws right here, which looks like it eventually wants to favor to the downside. And that's an important clue. We've got the kelp band, which is already starting to turn into this direction, another clue that the macro cycle is correct. Let's go to an even larger time frame. In this time frame, we've got an inverse jaws beginning as the orange crosses down, hasn't curved up yet to show very strong selling momentum yet. We do have this curvature already happening in the 5 MA curling down into the 9 MA on an 8-day chart, and we have this kelp band channel and this MA right here, which is my 100, coming into a point of an agreement, like right around this area at the 260-ish spot. And if I were to just be kind of generous with a possible extension, because you always have to allow tails too, the tails might cross and extend those targets just by a bit. And then that gives us a nice MTF right into that region. And now let's go ahead and zoom in and see what we got. So I have mentioned that on the daily we have a jaws, which is going to have a tendency to protect price from really plunging. And I mentioned that it could resolve sideways or in a more bullish manner. Now this looks to me like it's going to be more of a sideways manner because the bigger times, as I've mentioned, have inverse jaws weighing them down. And those bigger scales are pretty powerful, and therefore a good expectation is that if you did get a high, it probably would remain under this kelp channel that is dropping on the daily and gives us this region of a high with symmetry to the jaws at approximately September 12th, September 13th to 16th, where we could get noisy movement up and both up and down right in this range. We can even get like a little bit more bearishness in the next couple days leading to Monday, and then probably resolve right around here. And I don't want to confuse anybody with this particular line, but basically my expectation is this area remains a support, this area is resistance, and it would happen in a 1, 2, 3 step manner, and then finally resolve bullishly. So that would conclude this video, and you could see I spent quite a bit of time doing it, so sometimes these MTFs are not that simple and straightforward, so they do require quite a bit of analysis. So I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, let me know.